Asterisk, asterisk, hook. Script opening, you'll end up begging on the streets. That's what my father told me in front of my entire family the day I said I wanted to become a surgeon who designs medical instruments instead of just using them. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. He just looked at me like I was already a disappointment he'd have to explain to relatives for the rest of his life. Choose a real career, he said, something respectable, something safe. I was 22 years old, standing in our living room, holding a sketchbook full of designs nobody had asked me to draw. My mother stayed silent, my younger brother smirked, and my father walked out of the room like the conversation was already over. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already made my decision 3 weeks earlier, and it wasn't the one he wanted. For the next 11 years, I didn't call home much, not out of anger, out of shame, maybe. Or maybe because I didn't have anything to prove yet. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone didn't stop ringing. A hospital in Germany, a research team in Seoul, a surgeon in Boston I'd never met, asking permission to use something I'd built in a garage with $200 and a broken 3D printer. By the end of that week, my design was sitting on operating tables in 14 countries. And the man who once told me I'd end up begging on the streets, he was about to find out exactly what real career meant, the hard way. But before any of that happened, I need to take you back. Back to the night everything actually started, the night I almost gave up completely. My name is Erez. I was born in a small town, in a middle-class household where stability wasn't just a word, it was religion. My father, Rashid, worked as a government clerk for 32 years. Same desk, same chair, same lunchbox every single day. To him, that wasn't boring, that was success. That was what survival looked like for a man who grew up with nothing. So when I was born, he already had my life planned out. Doctor, engineer, government officer, something with a title people respected at weddings. Growing up, our house was small but full of noise. My mother cooking, my younger brother Farhan watching cricket way too loud, and me sitting in the corner with a broken calculator I'd taken apart just to see how it worked. I was never the smart kid in the traditional sense. I struggled with textbooks. But give me a machine, a tool, anything mechanical, and I could sit with it for hours, completely lost in how it moved, how it functioned, how it could be better. By the time I turned 18, I got into medical college. Not because I dreamed of curing diseases, but because during my first hospital visit, I watched a surgeon struggle with an outdated instrument for almost 10 minutes during a routine procedure. 10 minutes that could have cost someone their life. That moment didn't scare me. It fascinated me. I remember standing outside the operation theater, thinking, why hasn't anyone fixed this? That question became an obsession. While my classmates studied to become practicing doctors, I started sketching, instrument designs, improved grips, better precision tools. I spent nights in the hostel with a flashlight, drawing modifications on medical tools that already existed for 100 years, tools nobody thought needed to change. My roommate at the time, Zaid, used to say, "Bye, you're going to fail your exams doing this." He wasn't wrong. My grades were average. But something inside me knew the classroom wasn't where I was supposed to shine. The only person who understood was my mother. She never said much, but she'd quietly bring me tea at 2 a.m. while I worked, glancing at my sketches without judgment. "If it makes you this happy," she once said, "then it's not a waste of time." But my father? My father saw report cards. He saw a son choosing hobbies over a stable future. He saw risk, and risk to a man like him was the enemy. By the time I finished college, I had a decision to make. Apply for a safe hospital job like everyone expected, or chase this idea that had been living rent-free in my head for 6 years. An idea for a surgical tool that could make certain operations faster, safer, and less traumatic for patients. I chose the second option. I had no funding, no connections, no guarantee it would work. What I did have was a small workshop table in the corner of my room, a laptop with cracked design software, and a stubborn belief that this idea was worth more than any safe paycheck. On the surface, my life looked completely normal. Same town, same family dinners, same questions from relatives about when are you settling down. But underneath that ordinary routine, something had already shifted. I just didn't know yet how far that shift would take me, or how much it would cost. Asterisk, asterisk, phase 3, First disturbance, asterisk asterisk. My new betten irmandel. 3 months into building my prototype, I ran out of money. Not tight budget ran out, completely, embarrassingly empty. My savings from part-time tutoring jobs during college were gone. The specialized steel alloy I needed for the instrument's joint mechanism alone cost more than what my father earned in 2 months. I remember sitting on the floor of my room, surrounded by failed prototypes, pieces of metal that looked more like broken jewelry than surgical tools, doing math in my head that just didn't add up. That's when I made a decision I'm still not proud of. I didn't tell my father I needed money for my project. I knew exactly what he'd say. So I told him I needed funds for a certification course, something that sounded safe, sounded like the kind of investment he'd approve of. He transferred the money without a single question. That trust, it sat heavy in my chest every single day after. For a while, it worked. I finished the first real prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I remember holding it in my hands at 3 a.m., testing the joint rotation over and over, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Then came the message. It was from Dr. Kapoor, a senior surgeon I'd cold emailed months earlier, someone who'd occasionally replied with short, encouraging notes. This time, his message was different. Aras, we need to talk. Call me when you see this, it's important. No emoji, no hope you're doing well. Just 5 words that made my stomach drop. I called him immediately. His voice was careful, measured, the way people talk when they're about to deliver bad news wrapped in politeness. I shared your design with a colleague, he said, for feedback, but he mentioned something concerning. Someone already filed a provisional patent for something very similar, same joint mechanism, same rotation concept. I remember gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. That's not possible, I said. I designed this myself. I have every sketch, every version, dated. I believe you, he said quickly. But belief doesn't matter in patent offices, Aras. Documentation does. And right now, someone else's paperwork exists. Yours doesn't. The call ended, but the questions didn't. Who else knew about this design? I hadn't shared it publicly. I hadn't posted anything online. The only people who'd seen detailed versions were Dr. Kapoor, 2 professors I'd consulted for feedback, and Zaid, my old roommate, my friend. I told myself it was a coincidence. Ideas overlap all the time in engineering, it happens. But then I remembered something small, something I'd brushed off months earlier. Zaid asking oddly specific questions about my rotation mechanism during our last phone call. Questions that seemed casual at the time. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't believe it, not about someone who used to bring me food during hostile exam weeks, someone who once stayed up all night helping me rebuild a corrupted file. But the timing was too exact. The similarity was too specific. I sat there that night, staring at the prototype in my hands, the thing I'd sacrificed my father's trust, my savings, and months of sleepless nights to build. And for the first time, a new fear crept in. It wasn't the fear of failing. It was the fear that maybe someone had already stolen my future before I even had the chance to fight for it. The next morning, I did what any desperate person does. I started digging. I pulled up the patent database at 6 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, coffee going cold next to me. It took me 40 minutes of searching before I found it. Patent application number 2019/MED 4471. Filed 6 weeks ago. The applicant's name wasn't Zaid. It wasn't anyone I recognized. A company called Mednovex Solutions. I stared at that name for a long time. I'd never heard of them. No website, no social media presence, no news articles. Just a registered company name attached to a patent that looked disturbingly like 4 years of my life. I typed the company registration number into a business directory and found one thing. A director's name, Salman Qureshi. I searched that name for 2 hours. Nothing significant came up until I found a LinkedIn profile buried in the results. The profile was mostly empty, barely any connections, no profile picture. But under experience, one line that made everything inside me go cold. Consultant, Medical Research Division. The institution listed. The same college I went to. My college, my department. I called Dr. Kapoor again that afternoon. Do you know anyone named Salman Qureshi? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A pause. Longer than it should have been. Where did you hear that name? He said. He's listed as a director of the company that filed the patent, I said. A company with no history, no online presence, nothing. It's like it was created just to file this one application. Another pause. Here is, Doctor. Kapoor said slowly. How much do you actually know about how your design got circulated? Something about the way he asked that question bothered me. Not what he said, how he said it. Like he was measuring how much I already knew before deciding what to tell me. I sent it to you, I said carefully. And 2 professors. That's it. Right, he said. Then, I think you should come to the city, in person. Some conversation shouldn't happen over the phone. He ended the call before I could ask why. I arrived 2 days later, Dr. Kapoor's office was smaller than I imagined for a man with his reputation, books everywhere, certificates overlapping each other on the walls, the smell of old paper and disinfectant. He shook my hand but didn't smile. He slid a document across the desk before I'd even sat down properly. It was a research proposal, dated 14 months ago. My concept, my rotation mechanism, my instrument design, outlined in formal academic language, formatted as an official research project. At the bottom were 3 signatures. One was Dr. Kapoor's. The second was Professor Irfan, one of the 2 professors I'd consulted for feedback. The third signature I didn't recognize. What is this? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Dr. Kapoor leaned back in his chair and pressed his fingers together. 14 months ago, he said, Professor Irfan approached me with what he called a promising student concept worth developing institutionally. He said the student, you, had abandoned the project and moved on. I looked up from the document. He said I abandoned it? He said you gave him full permission to develop it under the department's name, that you weren't interested in pursuing it commercially. The room felt smaller suddenly. I never said that, I said. I never had that conversation, not once. Dr. Kapoor nodded slowly, like he believed me. But belief wasn't going to fix anything. I signed that proposal thinking it was standard procedure, he said. I didn't know you were still actively working on it. By the time I realized something was wrong, he paused. The patent application was already filed. I walked out of that office with 3 new questions replacing every answer I thought I'd found. If Professor Irfan told Dr. Kapoor I'd abandoned the project, then who told Professor Irfan to say that? And who was the third signature? And why would anyone go through this much trouble to steal the design of a nobody from a small town? Someone with no connections, no platform, no name. Unless the design was worth far more than I realized. That thought should have felt like validation. Instead, it felt like the ground disappearing beneath my feet, because if powerful people were already moving to claim what I'd built, then I wasn't just fighting for credit anymore. I was already behind. And I didn't even know who I was fighting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the guest bed in Dr. Kapoor's city apartment. He'd insisted I stay rather than take a late bus back. Staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every interaction, every moment I'd shared my design with anyone, something wasn't adding up. Professor Irfan was a respected academic, quiet man, forgettable, almost, the kind of professor who sat in the back of faculty meetings and never caused problems. He had no history of research misconduct, no reputation for this kind of thing, so why would he lie? Why would he tell Dr. Kapoor I'd abandoned the project? What did he gain from it? I picked up my phone and did something I should have done weeks earlier. I searched Professor Irfan's name alongside Mednovex Solutions. Nothing direct came up. Then I tried his name alongside Salman Qureshi. One result. A single photograph from a university alumni dinner, 3 years old, buried in a college newsletter nobody read. 2 men standing together, mid-laugh, holding dinner plates. Professor Irfan, and a man whose name was tagged in the caption as ***, Salman Qureshi, ***, not a consultant, not a businessman, but described in that caption as something that reframed everything I thought I knew. Salman Qureshi, Senior Acquisitions Director, Hartwell Medical Group. Hartwell Medical Group. I sat up straight. Hartwell wasn't just a company. Hartwell was one of the largest surgical equipment manufacturers in Asia, billion-dollar infrastructure, hospitals in 11 countries, government contracts across 3 continents. They didn't just make medical tools, they controlled which medical tools got used, which got approved, which got distributed. If a new instrument entered the market without their involvement, it either got bought out, buried, or both. And somehow, a senior director from Hartwell was connected to a ghost company that had filed a patent on my design. This wasn't a professor stealing a student's idea for academic credit. This was a corporation. I knocked on Dr. Kapoor's bedroom door at 1 a.m. I'm not sure what I expected. Anger at being woken up, maybe. Instead, he opened the door almost immediately, still fully dressed, glasses on, like he hadn't slept either, like he'd been waiting. "Hartwell," I said. Just the one word. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and let me in. On his desk was a file I hadn't seen earlier. He picked it up and handed it to me without explanation. Inside were printed emails, formal, corporate, carefully worded, between Hartwell Medical Group and the university's Research Commercialization Department. Dated almost 2 years ago. They were scouting, systematically going through student and faculty research proposals at medical institutions across the region, looking for innovations they could acquire cheaply, or if the inventor wasn't cooperative, acquire through other means. My proposal was flagged in their internal notes with 2 words that made my breath catch: high potential. Nadayan found my design before I even knew anyone was looking, before I had a prototype, before I had anything except sketches in a notebook. "How long have you known about this?" I asked Dr. Kapoor. He sat down heavily in his chair. "I suspected something when Irfan approached me with that proposal," he said. The language was too formal, too polished for something that came from a student project. I started asking quiet questions. But by the time I connected Irfan to Hartwell, he gestured at the file in my hands. The patent was already moving through the system. "So you've been investigating this," I said slowly. "This whole time, trying to," he said, carefully. "These aren't small people, Araz. Hartwell has legal teams that exist specifically to crush exactly this kind of challenge. They've done it before." "Before," I said. "This has happened before." Dr. Kapoor opened the file to the last page and pointed to a name I didn't recognize. A researcher from Pune. Similar situation, innovative medical device concept, similar pattern of institutional manipulation, patent filed under a shell company connected to Hartwell. The case went to court. The researcher lost everything: savings, reputation, career. The case was settled quietly 18 months later, with a non-disclosure agreement. "He wasn't the first either," Dr. Kapoor said quietly. I stared at the page. So this was a system. A deliberate, repeated, carefully structured system for stealing innovation from people who didn't have the power to fight back. And I had walked straight into it. But then something else hit me. Something that shifted the entire picture one more time. If Hartwell had flagged my design 2 years ago, and the patent was only filed 6 weeks ago, what were they waiting for? Why the gap? Why not move immediately? I looked up at Dr. Kapoor. "Why did they wait 2 years?" I asked. He took the file back slowly, closed it, and set it on the desk, and the expression on his face, not shock, not confusion, but something that looked almost like hesitation. Like a man deciding in real time how much truth to hand over. That expression told me the answer to that question wasn't going to be simple. That expression told me there was another layer underneath everything I'd just uncovered, and that layer involved someone I hadn't considered yet. Someone much closer to this story than a corporation or a professor or a ghost company. Someone I might already know. 2 days later, Dr. Kapoor introduced me to someone, Rehan Siddiqui, an intellectual property lawyer who'd spent 15 years fighting corporate patent cases. Compact man, sharp eyes, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, and made you feel like every word you said was being filed away somewhere useful. He reviewed everything in one sitting: my dated sketches, my prototype photographs, my email threads with professors, the Hartwell connection, the shell company, all of it. When he finished, he leaned back, removed his glasses, and said something I hadn't expected. "This is actually a strong case. I remember the exact feeling in my chest when he said those words. Like something that had been clenched tight for weeks finally loosened slightly. Your documentation is surprisingly thorough, Rehan continued. The date stamps on your design files, the email records, the prototype photographs. This establishes a clear timeline that predates their patent application by almost 3 years. If we file a patent opposition with this evidence, we have genuine grounds. How long would it take? I asked. Opposition proceedings typically run 6 to 18 months, he said. But given the strength of your documentation, we could push for an interim order to suspend the patent's active status while the case is reviewed. That alone would stop them from commercially exploiting your design during the process. Home. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. We filed the opposition 4 weeks later. The interim suspension order came through in 11 days, faster than even Rehan had predicted. The patent was frozen. Mednovex Solutions couldn't move forward. Hartwell couldn't use the design commercially. Everything was paused, pending full review. My phone buzzed with Rehan's message at 9:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Interim order granted. We're in a strong position. Well done. I sat in my room and stared at that message for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my mother. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough. That things were moving in the right direction, that the work was paying off, that maybe it was going to be okay. She cried a little, quietly, the way she always did, like she didn't want me to hear. That evening, for the first time in what felt like forever, I ate a proper meal. I slept before midnight. I even spent an hour just sitting outside, doing nothing, something that had felt like an unaffordable luxury for so long. Zaid called that night, surprisingly. Heard things are looking up, he said, casual, warm, like the last several months hadn't happened. Like I hadn't spent weeks wondering if he'd betrayed me. Where did you hear that? I asked. Word travels, he said, and then laughed. Relax, Erez. I'm happy for you. Seriously. I told him thanks and ended the call. Then I should have sat with the discomfort of that conversation longer than I did. I should have asked more questions. But I was tired. And for one brief moment, I let myself believe the hard part was over. That was my mistake. That is disgums. 3 weeks after the interim order, Rehan called me. His voice was different this time. Careful in a way that immediately dissolved everything I'd spent 3 weeks rebuilding inside myself. Erez, Hartwell has filed a counter-response, he said, and they've submitted new documentation. What kind of documentation? I asked. A pause. They have a signed consent form, Rehan said slowly, dated 14 months ago, authorizing the institutional development of your design. That's fabricated, I said immediately. I never signed anything. The signature on the form, Rehan said, cutting me gently but firmly, has been verified by a forensic document examiner they hired. The room tilted slightly. It matches yours, Erez. The email was gone. That's the first thing I checked the next morning, the email I'd sent Professor Irfan 14 months ago, the one with my project summary attached, the one with the timestamp that could have proven why I was really in his office that day. Gone. Deleted. Not just from my inbox, from my sent folder too. I checked my trash. Empty. I sat staring at the screen for a long time, trying to understand how that was possible. I hadn't deleted it. I was certain of that. I never deleted emails related to the project. It was the one organizational habit I'd maintained throughout everything. Someone had accessed my account. I checked the login history. 3 days ago, 2:47 a.m., a login from a device I didn't recognize. Location data showed a city 300 kilometers away. 3 days ago was the same day Zaid had called me. Warm and casual. Word travels. He hadn't called to congratulate me. He'd called to keep me on the phone long enough to feel safe, relaxed, off guard, while someone used information he'd provided to access my email and remove the one piece of evidence that could have supported my case. I called Rehan and told him. The silence on his end lasted longer than I wanted it to. Without that email, he said finally, the misrepresentation argument becomes significantly harder to establish. We can still argue it, but now it's your word against a document with your verified signature. He paused. Hartwell's legal team will know that, which means they'll push harder now, not less. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means they may move to have the interim suspension lifted, he said. If their documentation holds and ours weakens, the Patent Review Board could rule in their favor, possibly within 60 days. 60 days. And if they win the review, then the patent stands. They own the design legally, and any future use of your own technique, commercially, academically, anywhere, becomes their intellectual property. I didn't say anything. Erez, Rihan said quietly. I want to keep fighting this, but I need you to understand the position we're in right now. That afternoon, Dr. Kapoor called me. He sounded different, strained. I've been asked to appear before the university's internal ethics committee, he said. Someone filed a complaint, anonymous, alleging that I've been conducting unauthorized external investigations into faculty conduct. He exhaled slowly. It's a suppression tactic, standard playbook for situations like this. But it means I need to step back, Erez, publicly at least. I can't be visibly involved while this review is pending. I understand, I said, but I didn't, really, because Dr. Kapoor was the only person inside the institution I trusted, and now he was being systematically removed from the board. That evening, Rihan sent a message. One more thing you should know. Hartwell has retained 3 additional IP lawyers for the counter case. This is no longer a routine opposition for them. They're treating it as a priority litigation. A billion-dollar corporation, priority litigation, 3 lawyers, against me, a small-town nobody with a cracked laptop, a prototype built on money I'd taken from my father under false pretenses, and evidence that was disappearing faster than I could document it. I sat on the floor of my room that night, the same floor where I'd sat months earlier surrounded by failed prototypes, and I tried to locate, somewhere inside myself, a reason to keep going. It was harder to find than I expected. For a long time, I just sat there. Then my eyes drifted to the corner of my desk, to something I hadn't touched in weeks, my original sketchbook, the one from the very beginning, pages warped from old tea spills, edges worn soft, every early version of the design drawn and redrawn across 2 years of thinking. I picked it up slowly, and on the inside back cover, something I'd written to myself in the early days, when the idea was still just an idea and failure felt theoretical rather than real. 6 words in my own handwriting. The process doesn't lie. You were here. I stared at those words for a long time. The sketchbook wasn't digital. It had never been uploaded anywhere. It couldn't be remotely deleted or accessed or manipulated, and every page was dated, every iteration, every version, every dead end and restart and breakthrough, documented in physical ink, in my hand, across 2 years of consistent development. It wasn't a legal document, it wasn't admissible on its own, but it was something Hartwell didn't know existed, and in 60 days, I needed to figure out exactly how to make it matter. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did something I should have done from the beginning. I stopped reacting to Hartwell's moves and started building my own. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, not a safe one, but a plan that was entirely mine, built around the one thing they couldn't touch, the physical proof of my creative process. The sketchbook was the foundation. But a sketchbook alone wouldn't be enough to convince a patent review board dominated by legal precedent and corporate pressure. I needed more than just evidence of my work. I needed witnesses, independent, credible voices who could validate my timeline and my process in ways Hartwell couldn't discredit. I called Rihan at 7 a.m. I need you to file a request, I said, for an open hearing. Silence. Patent opposition cases aren't typically conducted in open hearings, he said carefully. Those are closed administrative reviews. I know, I said, but there's precedent for requesting public hearings when there's evidence of institutional manipulation or fraud. You said it yourself. What happened to me has happened to others. This isn't just about my patent. It's about a pattern. Erez, he said slowly, an open hearing means Hartwell's legal team will be in the room. They'll cross-examine you directly. They'll pick apart every detail of your story in front of a panel. If there's even one inconsistency, I know the risk, I said, but right now we're fighting them in a closed process where documentation is everything, and they've already compromised my documentation. An open hearing changes the battlefield. It forces them to argue in front of people. in front of scrutiny. Rihan was quiet for a long moment. "What exactly are you planning?" he asked. "I'm going to bring the sketchbook," I said. "Every dated page, every iteration. I'm going to walk the panel through the entire creative process, not just the final design, but how I got there. The dead ends, the mistakes, the version from 2 years before their patent application even existed." "That establishes timeline," Rihan said, "but it doesn't prove misrepresentation." "No," I agreed, "but here's what will. I'm going to find the other victims." Another pause. "The researcher from Pune," I continued. "The one Dr. Kapoor mentioned. The one who lost his case and signed an NDA. And anyone else Hartwell has done this to. If I can get even one of them to testify, not about my case, but about Hartwell's pattern, it establishes a system. It shows the panel that what happened to me isn't isolated, it's deliberate." "Ariz," Rihan said carefully, "those NDAs are legally binding. If someone violates one, Hartwell can destroy them financially. No one's going to risk that." "Maybe not for themselves," I said, "but maybe for something bigger than one person's career." I spent the next 2 days tracking down names. The researcher from Pune, Dr. Mehta, took 4 phone calls before he even agreed to meet. When we finally sat across from each other in a small cafe, he looked older than his profile photo, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "I can't help you," he said before I'd even finished explaining. "I have a family, a mortgage." Hartwell made sure I understood what happens if I talk. "I'm not asking you to break your NDA publicly," I said. "I'm asking you to submit a sealed affidavit to the review board. Just your experience, your timeline, the pattern. It stays confidential unless the board rules it's relevant." He looked at me like I'd suggested walking into fire. "And if they rule it relevant," he said quietly, "then what? Hartwell's lawyers show up at my door the next day?" "Maybe," I said honestly. "Or maybe, if enough of us stand together, they finally face consequences for what they've been doing." "Nady-do-dee-do," Dr. Mehta stared into his coffee for a long time. "I'll think about it," he said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. By the end of the week, I had 3 possible witnesses. None confirmed, all terrified, all with more to lose than I did. Rihan filed the request for an open hearing. The board had 30 days to respond. If they denied it, my case died quietly in a closed review, buried under Hartwell's superior documentation and legal machinery. If they approved it, I'd walk into a room where I'd face their lawyers directly. People trained to dismantle stories, to find inconsistencies, to make you doubt your own memory in real time. And if I failed, if even one part of my testimony cracked under cross-examination, I wouldn't just lose the patent. I'd lose the right to ever claim the work was mine. But if I didn't try this, if I stayed in their system, playing by their rules, reacting to their moves, I'd already lost. So I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to wait for their response. I was going to make sure that when that hearing happened, if it happened, the story was already public, because Hartwell's greatest weapon wasn't their lawyers. It was silence. And I was about to break it. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, but I didn't wait until Wednesday. On Monday evening, I posted everything. Not on some obscure blog, not in a private forum. I posted it publicly. Twitter, LinkedIn, a detailed thread on Reddit's medical innovation community, the full story. My timeline, the sketchbook pages, screenshots of deleted emails I'd recovered from an old backup drive I hadn't checked until 2 days prior. The connection between Professor Irfan, Salman Qureshi, Mednavex Solutions, and Hartwell Medical Group. I tagged journalists, medical ethics organizations, university oversight committees, patent reform advocates. The thread went live at 8:47 p.m. By 10 p.m., it had been shared 400 times. By midnight, a healthcare journalist from a national publication had messaged me asking for an interview. By Tuesday morning, Hartwell's PR team was already issuing statements, baseless allegations from a disgruntled individual. "We protect our intellectual property through lawful means and stand by our rigorous ethical standards." But the silence was broken. And once people started looking, really looking, they found the others. Dr. Mehta from Pune commented on my thread. He didn't violate his NDA, he just wrote 5 words. "This happened to me too." Within hours, 2 more names appeared, different cities, different designs, same pattern. Wednesday morning arrived faster than I was ready for. The hearing room was smaller than I'd imagined, sterile white walls, a long table where 3 patent review board members sat, their faces unreadable. Rihan sat beside me, his briefcase open, documents arranged with precision. Across from us, Hartwell's legal team. 3 lawyers in identical dark suits, and behind them, seated in the observers section, Professor Irfan. Our eyes met for half a second. He looked away first. The lead board member, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, opened the session. This hearing was requested under exceptional circumstances, she said. We'll proceed with testimony from the applicant, followed by cross-examination. Mr. Ares, you may begin. I stood, my hands were shaking slightly, so I gripped the edge of the table. 2 years ago, I began, I designed a surgical instrument in my college hostel room, not because I had funding, not because anyone asked me to, but because I watched a surgeon struggle with an outdated tool during a procedure and thought, someone should fix this. I opened the sketchbook. This is every version of that idea. Every mistake, every iteration, dated, documented, in my handwriting. I walked them through it, page by page, the early concepts that didn't work, the breakthrough that changed the rotation mechanism. The version from 18 months before Hartwell Shell Company even filed their patent. One of the board members leaned forward slightly. Mr. Ares, she said, the opposing counsel has submitted a consent form with your verified signature. How do you account for that? I signed it, I said. But I was told it was a grant application form. I was never informed I was signing away rights to my own design. Hartwell's lead lawyer stood immediately. Objection to characterization, he said smoothly. The consent form clearly states its purpose in the header text. If Mr. Ares signed without reading, that reflects his own negligence, not misrepresentation. I have an email, I said, louder than I intended. Sent the week before that meeting, confirming my appointment with Professor Irfan, specifically to discuss a research grant application. I pulled it up on my laptop, the backup I'd found, the one they didn't know existed, and turned the screen toward the board. The timestamp was clear. The subject line read, Meeting confirmation, grant application review. The room went quiet. Hartwell's lawyer didn't miss a beat. Email subject lines can be edited retroactively, not on archived backups, Rihan said, standing. We've submitted the metadata for forensic review. The timestamp is intact. The board members exchanged glances. Then the lead lawyer pivoted. Let's address the larger issue, he said, turning toward me. You've made serious public allegations in the last 48 hours, accusations of corporate theft, institutional conspiracy. Yet you have no direct evidence that Hartwell Medical Group ever contacted you, approached you, or even knew you existed prior to the patent filing. He let that statement sit. Your entire case, he continued, is built on circumstantial connections and speculation. A photograph at a dinner, a shell company registration, employment records, but no communication, no contract, no proof of intent. He looked directly at me. So I'll ask you plainly, Mr. Ares, do you have any evidence that Hartwell Medical Group deliberately targeted you? I looked at Rihan. He gave the smallest shake of his head. We didn't have it. Not the smoking gun. Not the direct order from Hartwell to Irfan saying acquire this student's design. The lawyer knew it too. I thought not, he said, and started to sit back down. That's when the door at the back of the room opened. Everyone turned. A man walked in, late 50s, wearing a simple button-down shirt, carrying a folder. I didn't recognize him at first, but Professor Irfan did. The color drained from his face. The man walked straight to the board's table and set the folder down. My name is Nadim Qureshi, he said quietly. Salman Qureshi is my younger brother. He opened the folder. And these are internal emails between him and Hartwell's acquisitions department, spanning 3 years, including communications specifically naming Ares and his rotation mechanism design, dated 16 months before the patent was filed. The room went completely still. Nadim looked at me, then at the board. My brother built a career helping corporations take what didn't belong to them, he said. I stayed silent too long. I won't anymore. Hartwell's lawyers stood immediately, voices overlapping, procedural objections piling up. But the board chair raised one hand. We'll review the submission, she said. And just like that, the ground shifted. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Enough to prove I wasn't imagining it. Enough to prove I wasn't alone. The hearing was adjourned for 3 days while the board reviewed Nadim's submission. I met him outside the building afterward. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. Why now? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Just looked down at his hands. 6 months ago, my brother came to me, he said finally. He was celebrating. He'd closed a deal, a big one. Medical device acquisition. Clean paperwork. Big payout from Hartwell. He paused. He showed me the design. He was proud of how smoothly the whole operation had gone. Nadim looked up at me. And I recognized it. Wamding. Recognized it how? From a university exhibition, he said. 3 years ago. I was a guest speaker at your college. Gave a talk on IP law for engineering students. There was a small showcase afterward in the lobby. Student projects on display tables. My breath caught. I remembered that exhibition. I'd put my early sketches on a poster board. Nothing formal, just a small presentation as part of an academic requirement. I'd stood by my table for 2 hours while maybe 15 people walked past. I didn't think anyone important had noticed. I saw your design that day, Nadim continued. I even stopped and asked you questions. You were so excited about it. He smiled faintly. You probably don't remember me. I didn't. But I mentioned it to my brother that evening, Nadim said, and his expression darkened. Just casual conversation. I told him I'd seen something interesting. A student with a promising surgical tool concept. I even mentioned your name. He stopped. And I understood. You didn't know what he'd do with that information, I said quietly. Nadim shook his head. I thought he'd maybe connect you with investors, mentorship. I thought I was helping. His voice dropped. I didn't know he'd built an entire system around identifying innovations early and extracting them before the creators even understood what they had. So that was the missing piece. Not a spy in my inner circle. Not a breach of trust from someone close. An innocent conversation. A brother mentioning a talented student to another brother, and that brother turning it into an opportunity. Hartwell hadn't found me through betrayal or surveillance. They'd found me because I'd been visible. Naive. Excited to show my work to anyone who'd listen, and someone with the right connections had been paying attention. When I saw your post on Monday, Nadim said, and realized what Salman had done, what *I'd inadvertently helped start. He exhaled slowly. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stood there for a long moment, processing it. All of this, the shell company, the forged consent, Zaid's recruitment, Professor Irfan's manipulation, had started because I put my idea on a display table at a university event, thinking no one important was watching, but someone was. And that someone knew exactly what to do with what they'd seen. Your brother, I said carefully. Is he going to face consequences for this? Nadim looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That depends on what the board decides, he said. And what Hartwell decides to protect. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said, your design deserved better than what happened to it. Better than my family. And then he walked away, leaving me standing outside a building that held, somewhere in its sterile rooms, the decision that would determine whether 4 years of my life had been stolen legally, or whether the truth still mattered. 9 days later, the board issued its decision. The patent filed by Mednovex Solutions was revoked, not suspended. Not delayed. Revoked. The board ruled that the consent form had been obtained through misrepresentation. That the documented timeline in my sketchbook and archived email established my prior ownership, and that the internal emails submitted by Nadim revealed a deliberate effort to acquire my work through deceptive means. Hartwell's legal team appealed, of course. But the damage was already done. The investigation became public. Professor Irfan resigned before the university could formally remove him. Salman Qureshi was dismissed from Hartwell, and Mednovex Solutions disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. Zaid sent me one message. I never thought it would go this far. I'm sorry. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Not because forgiveness was impossible, but because some apologies arrive only after the person apologizing has run out of places to hide. Months later, I received my own patent certificate in the mail. I held it in both hands for a long time, remembering every night I had nearly quit, every failed prototype, every page in that old sketchbook. But the certificate wasn't the moment that changed me most. That came when my father came into my workshop one evening. He stood quietly beside my work table, looking at the instrument I'd rebuilt from the ground up. "I was scared," he said finally. I looked at him. "Scared you'd fail?" I asked. He shook his head. "Scared you'd suffer. I thought a safe life was the same as a good life." For the first time, he picked up one of my sketches without dismissing it. "I'm sorry," he said. And this time, I believed it. Years later, when surgeons in hospitals across the world began using my technique, people called it revolutionary. But I remembered it differently. It started as a question in an operating room. Asterisk, why hasn't anyone fixed this? And it survived because, even when powerful people tried to take it, I refused to let them rewrite the truth. My father once told me to choose a real career. In the end, I did. Just not the one he imagined. 6 months later, Aries received a package at his door. No return address, just a plain brown box with his name written neatly on top. Inside, a photograph. It was from a medical conference in Berlin. The image showed an operating room during a live surgical demonstration. And there, clearly visible on the instrument tray, gleaming under the surgical lights, his design, the rotation mechanism he'd sketched in a hostel room at 2 a.m., the tool he'd built with $200 and a broken 3D printer, the idea someone once told him would leave him begging on the streets. Surgeons in 14 countries were using it now. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single line in careful handwriting. "This is what a real career looks like." Aries turned the photo over again, staring at the instrument in the surgeon's hands, and then he picked up his phone. He hadn't called home in weeks, maybe longer. His father answered on the third ring. "Abba," Aries said quietly, "I need to tell you something." There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that held years of unspoken disappointment, fear, and pride all at once. "I'm listening," his father said. Aries looked at the photograph one more time. "You were right," he said. "I did need to choose a real career." Another pause. "I just didn't know what real meant until I built it myself." Silence. Then, barely audible, his father's voice, softer than Aries had heard it in years. "Tell me about it." And for the first time, Aries did. Not to prove anything, just to share.